Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Warrior Podcast, where we investigate what it means to live fearlessly on purpose. Each episode, we have a different guest who will share with us practical tools and real life examples that will inspire and inform us to live fearlessly on our purpose. I'm your host, Bob Cirino, and today joining me all the way from Indonesia is a great lifetime yoga practitioner and teacher, Mark Breadner. If you don't know Mark, holy cow, get to know Mark. You're in the right place at the right time. Mark has spent over 45 years of dedicated yoga practice and was formerly a somatic psychotherapist. So he's got this super rich background. I'm excited to dig in. He's evolved into a teacher trainer, a group facilitator, a coach, all the time harnessing the wisdom of yoga and psychotherapy. And this is what really made me want to connect with Mark is his mission. Yes, the mission of a spiritual warrior to help individuals reclaim their spirit. And I'll let you know on his website, it's all caps spirit, by the way,
Yeah.
to realize their power and connect with their inspired purpose. So when I saw Mark, I immediately was like, this individual has the qualities of spiritual warrior. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Bob. Thanks for the invite. And the more spiritual warriors on the planet, the better. It's very much needed at this time.
Absolutely. So, Mark, for those of our listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your story. I mean, your story is fascinating.
Well, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a blue-collar town in south of Sydney, Cronulla, a surfing town. And my mum was one of the first teachers of yoga in Australia. And she taught in the rumpus room downstairs and two classes, 2 nights a week. And they were packed. It was packed. It was all women. We didn't see a man in sight in those days, and it was all women, and they had their leotards on the outside and their leg warmers and the chunky foam mats for those people that remember those yoga mats. And I just started doing it when I was 5, and I had a remembrance in a sense. I just connected right from the beginning, and so right from that time, it's always been my path. And I feel very fortunate. My mum was my first teacher. I think a lot of kids grow up with mums as yoga teachers these days, but it was rare back then. And also she was very religious. And those two things didn't kind of recognize each other. You know, the Christian religion didn't really recognize yoga. So it was a very interesting thing. She was very passionate about both of those. And I guess I was doing it my whole life, but I started apprenticing with her when I was 15. We used to work at the local hospital and work with Down syndrome children and asthmatic children. And I was hooked with the teaching. And I started myself when I was 18. So I've been teaching ever since. I'm the longest serving yoga educator in Australia. I've been created training packages for many of the big, organizations and chains. And I have reams and reams of content for many years of creating content. I kind of evolved into yoga as a niche or a personal brand. So I worked in elite sport for a number of years and worked with CEOs and disability. But my passion's always been about education. So I spent a lot of time in India going backwards and forwards for decades and met a lot of extraordinary beings, men and women, who we would, classify as masters. And, I did a lot of that advanced asana, like a lot of people in my teens, early 20s. I was trying to bend myself into some form of happiness, and it didn't really work. And I got very proficient, but I still felt this karmic stuff I was dealing with being, lost and empty, and I was very rageful inside, and nothing of that really changed. So I got sick, packed up, went to India, met these beings, and they were glowing and they were vibrating, and they were happy for no reason, and they exuded love. And I was thinking, I want what they've got, and I want to know, what are they doing that I'm not doing? What are they practicing that I'm not practicing? So I spent a lot of time on that exact kind of mission. And then when I would get the practices, I'd ask them why. Why why do we do that? And how does it fit together? And why does that go to this next thing? Because I wanted to educate other people, and Westerners wanted to know that question, why? The Indian people will just go practice, but we want to know why. Because if I don't know why, I'm not doing it. So I spent a lot of time taking all this complex information and then simplifying it into models and things like that. So that's really where I am now, taking yoga from teaching classes into a life coaching system and using a total yoga transformation, and really to help yoga teachers be at the leading edge of health and well-being on the planet. Because I think if you understand the full system as a science and you feel confident to teach the invisible parts, then you've got the power in your hands to create a lot of change on the planet.
Now, Mark, when you say the invisible parts, what do you mean when you say that?
The non-material, so breath, prana, mind, consciousness, spirit, those types of things.
I have a background in science. I was pursuing 2 science degrees and a minor in biochemistry, and the idea of prana or subtle energy was just totally inane to me. I was like, there's no way this is real. Um, but as a scientist, I engaged with it and said, well, let's have a hypothesis and let's test the hypothesis. How did you start to engage with these ideas? You said you had a remembrance, were they natural to you already, or did you enter with skepticism? What was that like?
No, I mean, as a kid, you have that innate curiosity, and I just understood it. And I had it, you have that connection as a kid, but then your karmic journey, you tend to lose it and disconnect from it. And then it's like, oh my God, I was on the right path then, and I forgot. Because even my mum, when she was teaching classes then, she was doing the kriyas. Just doing the tantra without really understanding that herself or knowing it. She was teaching those things, and I could feel the power in those things. But I went totally off course, like a lot of us do, and I had to find my way back to it. But it always felt natural, intuitively. Yeah, for sure. When I work with the breath and the prana and channel it through my body, and activate my chakras and open up my consciousness. That all made sense, but it didn't make sense to anyone else. I mean, I'd have these conversations, and it was like crickets. So that was again part of it. Yeah, because most people don't understand those things, and either they don't understand it or they have no intentions of really wanting to. So yeah, I wanted to find those answers and the communication of it so people got it. Now, of course, with the science as it's advanced, yeah, there's a lot more of that saying, yeah, well, everything's energy. Science will tell you that now. We're just energetic beings, and we're seeing more and more of sound vibrations and yantras and all these sorts of things, and the cymatics and all this incredible science is coming through to back up what the yogis have been saying for thousands of years. Been saying this stuff, and science is going, yeah, we just found this. And but the cool thing is, yoga is actually a science, and what a lot of people don't understand, that it's a scientific method of meditation. It's got set processes and steps to go along, and if you fall off path, there's antidotes to get back on. But it's a path to get you beyond your mind, to samadhi, to merge into this great invisible void, into the field of potential and possibility. And I guess that's the best way to look at it. These invisible aspects of ourselves is just our potential and possibility. So even if you don't understand the invisible, everyone knows that you've got a greater possibility, a greater potential. We know that there's something, and really that's something. That's what the invisible is. But we can really we can ground that and make it understandable and implementable and practical in everyday life.
So if you're sitting down with, a CEO or some high performance individual, and their eyes are glassing over as you're talking about energy, what's your starting point with those kind of individuals to begin to experience this aspect of their being?
Well, it's all in the languaging. So, if I think now for a lot of yoga teachers, I'm helping them move into personal brand. And I think that's the direction of how it's going to go, and having a unique solution under the umbrella of yoga. But whatever that niche is, it's just that then about communicating to the conversations that those people are having. So if I'm working with, when I was working with the elite swimmers or the pro surfers, they're sitting around a cafe and they're having different conversations. As to the CEOs, they're having different conversations. So you have to say it into their language. So, like for example, meditation, I would talk about having a high performance mind, and we'll have you know, uh, for the athletes, inexhaustible energy, and they're like, oh yeah, I want that, and I want,
Sure.
and that you can recover really quickly by being able to, channel your energy system in a certain way. So really, it's just that they're all aware of those things, but we just take out the yogic language and certainly the Sanskrit, 100%, and then talk in their language in what they want. So it has to be language to what they're wanting, yeah, and then just make it practical, and then people can take it on because they understand. Like for example, with the breath, there's power involved with it. I mean, even if the athletes, the more utilization of oxygen, right, the higher percentage, the better. And it's only 1 to 3%. Those people, CEOs, athletes, they're just looking for that 1 to 3%. They're already operating at an elite level. They may be operating at an elite level also, but be highly stressed. So you have to work in the underneath, well, the foundations and the supporting of that process. So again, look at the individual. I think the yoga is the science, but the art is the relationship. So you'll look at the person in front of you, and you've got all of these goodies, this great tool bag of yoga, and then how do you apply it to each individual? And that's the art of it, relating to the person in front of you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Mark. So you say that your mission is to help individuals reclaim their spirit. Now, when you say spirit, or when we talk about the spiritual aspect of a spiritual warrior, what do you mean when you say that?
I mean that they find, what they had when they were a kid. When they reconnect to their joy. They reconnect to an open heart. They reconnect to inclusiveness. They reconnect to, uh, love and joy. Tibetan Buddhists say that's your ground state of being, right? Love, joy, compassion, equanimity. And yoga says, when you get close to the self, it's a very high vibrational, high energy state, and that is not the vibration of that is love, joy, and compassion. And for me, that's the palpable states when you can stabilize more love and joy and compassion in your life and inclusiveness in your life. Then that is spirit. That is spirit coming through you. And on another sense of that is that spirit is our intuition, our the insight and inspiration. We know just because we know. When we're operating out of mind, we're just operating out of knowledge that we've gathered, and it's just information, and it gets recycled. But beyond that, we get those moments of intuition and inspiration. That's spirit speaking to you. And so as we develop our yoga practice, right, as you do that kind of warrior path, and you choose the path, the road less traveled, then you'll start to hear that more. You'll start to get downloads more. Then the warrior path is learning to trust that. You want me to do what? Oh my God. Okay. How do I do that? Don't worry about the how. Trust it and start walking, right? One step in front of the other, and trust that. Because if you trust it, more of it will come.
So, what are some things that people can do or that you do to really develop the discipline of that warrior, right? Because a lot of us can say, okay, I'm just not going to trust that because it's unfamiliar to me. So, what are some of the ways that that you personally do that or you help others?
I think, like in yoga, they talk about you have to get the stuff out of the way, right? You have to get the stuff out of the way where you trip yourself over, where you doubt yourself, where you get fearful into stepping into bigger shoes. And so,
Mm.
one of the first processes in yoga, they would say, Kriya Yoga, which is 3 parts. And I'll say the Sanskrit words, but I'll break it down. But it says, tapas, swajaya, ishvari, pranidhana. But tapas means that you build your energy system to start purifying your body and nervous system, because you need a body, your vehicle, that can support higher spirit, and that just means higher energy, higher consciousness, higher electricity moving through your body. And tapas, in a practical way, just means, what's one thing that I'm going to do that is depleting my energy, that I'm going to remove, right? So, and that I won't break it. So I'm going to set for 10 days. I'm going to do this thing, and I will not break it. I'm going to set a
Mm.
tapasya, and make it realistic. It's not like over the top. Make it realistic, and then build on that, because that's how you build your fire until eventually you don't have to think about it. So, for example, if you drink 4 cups of coffee a day, and you know that that doesn't serve you, it keeps you wired, then bring it down to 3. Don't say, I'm going to give up coffee. Right? Bring it down to 3, and then after 10 days, you haven't broken it. Okay, maybe I'll try 2. And eventually we get to the 0. Should that be something you do? So you take one thing away, and then you add one thing. So what's one thing I'm going to add each day? I'm going to do 10 minutes of meditation. People say to me, I'm going to do an hour. Yeah, well, you might get home after a long day. It's 12 o'clock. You probably won't do that hour, but maybe 10 minutes. So again, something you won't break. So a tapasya is one thing you'll add and one thing you'll take away. That builds your energy system. And as you build your energy, it will start to clean out, the impurities in the body. Swajayam just means self-awareness. So we have to be aware of ourselves. Know thyself and be free. But it also means study the texts or the scriptures, Yoga Sutras, or anything that is a higher knowledge, whatever is sort of drawing your attention at the moment. And Ishvari Pranidhana means just surrender into something higher. Surrender into and if, we can say technically, classically, surrender to God or Brahman, but on a very practical level, surrender to a higher possibility. Surrender to the possibility of what you can be. Yeah. So build your energy, keep bringing self-awareness, and through self-awareness, set aside the things that don't serve you anymore, and keep opening into that higher possibility.
Amazing. Uh, let's reflect on your life, Mark. You have an eye patch, right? And
Yes.
you are a surfer. That was
Yes.
that was probably a really I mean, I don't know, but that was probably a very difficult experience for you. Can you talk about how what you just shared may have related to the experience that you had surfing?
Yeah. Well, my two constants in life, my two loves and passions, yoga and surfing. And I lost my eye surfing, and it was just a big day on one of my local breaks, and the pintail of my board, I just pulled into, if in surfing terms, I pulled into the barrel backhand, and it vacuumed out, and the board came around with the lip of the wave and speared through my eye, and it went through to my brain, and smashed my eye socket, my cheekbone, my whole face was open, paralyzed my face. I went down. I was gone. I went down the white tunnel. All of that whole experience, and then came back underwater, and anyway, we got back in and got patched up. And an interesting story related to what you're saying there is, I had 2 5.5 hour surgeries, and my mum came in when I could take guests, and she's like, "Oh my god," mum's freaking out, and she said, "Oh my god, oh my god," and she said, "You, your eye, your face." And I made a comment to her at that time that she said, just before she was passing, she said, that really impacted my life, what you said to me. Then it was really, wow. And I'm like, oh, what did I say? And she said, when I came in, was freaking out about your eyes, she said, you said to me, that's cool, Mum, don't worry about it. I got another one. Right? And, and so, and I meant it. I really did. And I think there's some level of that practice where the understanding of impermanence, and that's one of the things that I think I've kind of taken on. Yeah, whatever happens, it just unfolds in front, and there's a design to it, and just embrace it. And I think we would talk about that. Tantra, life embracing life. Whatever unfolds in front of you, just embrace it and learn from it and understand it and move with life. And I think that's a good thing that I have developed, where not trying to shape it or make it happen or make it different to what it is. I mean, I do bit of that, but a lot less than the people I know that are around me. I kind of let things unfold there, and but I've had, this is my passion. I've had lots and lots of injuries. I think I've had over 200 stitches. I've done both knees. I've broken ribs. I've broke my shoulder. I broke my collarbone, because I do it on toe-in surfing and big waves and things like that. So, but it's my passion, so I love it. I do it every day. I'll be checking it after this podcast. But I always say, sometimes I call myself the surf soul yogi, and the soul's in the center there. But they're the two things that connect to my soul. The thing on the external world that most connects me to my soul is surfing, especially when it's just it's on, and you're with your friends, and you're connected to the energy of the ocean. It just connects me to my soul. And then yoga is my inner pathway, my inner journey to the soul. So those two things they're the things that work well in my life.
Well, that is a radical story. You're surfing the waves of life, I guess, could not be a better analogy.
Yes.
So the next part of your mission statement, Mark, is realizing the power, and I think we talked about that a little bit, of realizing that there is this huge potential that we can connect with. What kind of advice would you give for people to find their inspired purpose? The last part of your mission statement is to help individuals connect with their inspired purpose. We talk about being a spiritual warrior as being fearlessly living on purpose, but how does somebody find that purpose?
Yeah. I think, I think three things, right? You've got to have the right practice, the right teachers and mentors, and be surrounded by good company. And so they say we are the sum of the five people we hang around most of the time. And I think it's true to a large extent. And if you want to improve yourself, if you want to evolve yourself, then it's important to have mentors or people in our field. We might call them the guru. We might call them the a mentor or a teacher or a guide or an inspiration. But look at how those people live their lives, and try to mimic that in a certain way. But also, you need guidance along the path, so it's good to surround yourself with the right teachers. When both you and I teachers that have guided us in a certain way, and you need it. It's you need the pathway, you need the roadmap. In the end, you've got to find your own path, but in the beginning, you need that roadmap to really direct you. And then you need the right practices, because, for example, in a lot of the yoga world now, a lot of it's just entertainment or alternate fitness offering. And so that's good in itself. We need a healthy body, and people like to be flexible and all those things, and it's wonderful, and there's some great teachers out there. But in the sense of living this best version of ourselves, living an inspired purpose, just doing the physicality is not going to get you there, and just doing it in a haphazard way is not going to get you there. You need to be able to have a science and a step-by-step process that's going to grow you and evolve you and take you further up the ladder all the time. And then the last part of that is you need to be surrounded by good company. The environment is very, very important. It's very hard to step into a better version of yourself if you're surrounded by, lower vibrational, lower energy, or the thing is you can either expand or contract. You can't do both at the same time. So a lot of the times when we're going into expansion, there's a little voice on us going, oh no, just stay where you're at, hang with the same people, do what you're doing. And this voice is going, no, 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 it hasn't worked for you. You're suffering. Step it up. And so you've got that friction place where you're trying to elevate into that place. So good company, practice, and teachers is very important to get you beyond that. I say, at a certain point, you've got to get up on the elevator, and you've got to let some people off on the third floor. It's like we can still be friends, you can still love them, but you need to go higher. You just need to let people go because it's a frequency. And once we do these habits in our life, these high vibrational frequencies, like eating well, doing your yoga, hydrating, meditating, serving others, all of these high vibrational activities will lock in a higher frequency. And then that just works through the law of resonance. When you lock in the higher frequency, then everything at that frequency starts to come into your life. And it's like, oh my God, my life's changing very quickly. What happened? Where did this come from? It was always there. You didn't have the frequency to match it. Yeah? And so you have to resist the urge to come back to, oh, you're our friend. You've always been like this. Don't change. Don't do it differently, or make you wrong for doing those things. So you gotta own that. And those three things: good company, good practice, and environment's important to lock in that higher frequency. It's well worth it because everything changes, and once you lock in the frequency, it's locked. It's stable. It's very hard to go backwards from there.
I love that, Mark. So it's not that we need to necessarily, what you're saying is, or what I'm hearing you say is that we don't necessarily need to know an exact description of our purpose, but we just need to start pursuing the things that bring us up and surround ourselves with the people who bring us up, be willing to be guided by people that we admire, and then do the things that we learn as far as practices are concerned. And then at some point it will become very clear to you of what your path is. I really love the meta purpose, right? So the purpose,
Yeah.
People say, well, I'm supposed to run a business, or I'm supposed to do, but it's just like one kind of expression. But we need to take a step back and be like, well, what is trying to be expressed? So don't get caught in the expression, but try to understand what's the principle of what's being expressed. And I love this connection with how you described surrendering to a higher possibility, because that is a great purpose.
That's great.
But we get nervous, right? The first time you probably got on a big wave, you look down that wave and you're like, oh my gosh, what a big possibility. But because you had the repetitions built into you through your tapas, through those increasing your system's ability to exist in a high energy state, then instead of getting spit out, you had the discipline and the experience that allowed you to stay in just a little bit longer into that higher possibility. I love that. And then the expression can change however it is, whether you have one eyes or two eyes, or or this practice or that practice. It can shift as long as that core idea exists.
Yeah, and as a physical system, it's genius. It's pretty amazing. For example, when I lost my eye, you lose your bifocals, so you lose your depth perception, and so I got back in the water as quick as I could, and but when I'd go to take off on a wave, I thought I'd have it, and then I'd just drop out of the ceiling because I couldn't see the curve of the wave, or I'd go to hit the lip and there wasn't any lip there, and I'd just go flying. And people would laugh, and it was pretty funny. But just keep persisting, And then after a few months, the brain just finds a new pathway that works it out. And I guess it's more from feel or whatever, but it works it out. And now I don't really notice any difference whatsoever. I know I'm doing it differently to somebody else, but my system, worked out just a new way of doing it. And yeah, that's the possibilities are always there. We just have to take the risk and trust. And so we would say, and we can go a little bit woo-woo, but we would say in the end, you just surrender it to God's will, to Brahman. And that's, the end point, really surrendering it, that you're not actually in the driver's seat making anything happen whatsoever. There's a divine plan, and there's a sense that you have this innate genius. You have a blueprint for genius. And we do our best to try and shape it and make it go in a certain way. But if we can just let go into it and allow inspired downloads to come, that's the end game. But that's super hard to do for most people.
Sure.
So
There's kind of two, when we're talking about this idea of taking a risk and surrendering, I can imagine that there might be two archetypes that we deal with. The first is the person who's risk averse, right? So they have to like step up and step into it. But then on the other end, Mark, there's the risk taker. I'm the risk taker, And so when we say take the risk, in the wisdom that you've gained throughout your experience and guiding other people through theirs, how do we know when we're inappropriately understanding this idea of take a risk? Maybe we're too flippant and we're saying, oh, I just leave it to whatever. How do you balance that?
well, it's the path of the warrior, right? It's they're going to strive towards their their ideal goal, with their heart and power fully behind it, with abandon in a lot of ways. So, but there's a number of people that, yeah, I'm not quite there yet. And I think that's, again, the art of the relationship. Whereas, because if someone's had a very challenging life, they've had traumas and difficulties and their karmic past's been a little more challenging, we have to be kind to those people. You have to build trust. You have to build safety. And because if the trust and safety is not there, there's going to be no step forward. So I think we have to work differently with people. When you've got that, or you've got that warrior kind of spirit, you'll charge, headlong into things. But I always say, how do we have maximum change while being kind to ourselves? And that's going to be different to different people. But, even as a warrior, yes, you want to have the maximum amount of change, but yeah, be aware of smashing yourself or burning yourself out. And of course, I've done that, and I'm sure you have as well. Where I would just take pranayama. I'd learn a pranayama practice, and I'd practice it for 4 hours, and I'd be like, I can't sleep.
Yeah.
I actually had one student come to me once, and a young man, in his early 20s. He's got this twitch, and he's like, I can't sleep, and I've got all these boils and stuff coming out. And I said, okay, well, tell me what it is. I read this book and I was really inspired, so I gave up sex and I gave up eating meat, and I'm doing like 4 hours pranayama, and I'm doing heaps of meditation and kriyas, and I'm doing all the right things. Like, dude, you can't go from 0 to 100 straight away. I acknowledge and appreciate your enthusiasm, but go out, have some fun, eat a steak, whatever, but just bring it back a little bit. You bring that same warrior, bring the same enthusiasm, but be kind to yourself and do it at a level that your system can manage it. And the way we manage it, it's different.
The word tapas can be interpreted directly into cooking or applying heat. So if you just jump right into a fire, you're gonna it's like taking a marshmallow and sticking it right into the middle of the fire. You're not going to get the result that you want. You have to build up into it, and then do the art of too cold, too hot, too cold, too hot, and then you get the perfect brown marshmallow for your s'more.
I like that. I like that. I might use that one.
Yeah. So, Mark, another question, because you have the unique perspective of a somatic psychotherapist, I'm really interested in, you know, not necessarily the yoga perspective, but the marrying of the two. When we're looking at when we go to level up, right? When we go to leave the people on the third floor of the elevator, uh, what we're doing is we're letting a part of our identity go. So there's a part of there's almost a death, which is very terrifying to the ego or to the identity or to, whatever construct you want to talk about. So from the perspective of somatic psychotherapy and with the practices that you know in yoga, how can these things come together to help us overcome that fight or flight experience we might have when we're trying to level up?
Well, yeah, for those that don't know, somatic just means body, right? And so it's a body orientated psychotherapy. So a lot of talk therapy is all cognitive, it's all looking at patterns of mind. But somatic therapy is then looking at how those patterns of mind are embodied, how they become congealed in the body. Like the Tibetan Buddhists say that body is just very slow mind, right? Or Reich would say that the body is just the mind congealed. So if we just work with the mind and don't work with the body, you're only kind of getting half of the picture. So like yoga is a great system that works like all levels. So somatic psychotherapy is also reshaping the body to actually reshape the mind. And one of the powerful teachings that I got from one of my main teachers and mentors who was my teacher when I did my psychotherapy training, Dr. Julie Henderson, was that she said to me, well-being is your ordinary state. And most people might go, well, yeah, but for me that was revolutionary. Like, what? I don't I
Why?
don't feel like that most of the time. And she's like, yeah, all we need to do is get the interference and obstacles out of the way, and who you are bubbles to the surface. I'm like, oh my God. And so then it was the path of, well, what's getting in the way? And we look at it at the level of, you know, the 8 limbs of yoga. You've got the niyama. Well, what's in your external world's getting in the way? So we have to start removing those things away. And what's the habits that you do? If you've got integrity, you're not using your energy wisely. If you've got attachments, then we talked about those things of getting your own house in order, purifying your system and surrendering and self-awareness. But then get your body steady and comfortable. So tension patterns, remove the tensions, remove the immobilizations in the joints, free the contractions in the diaphragms, purify your nervous system, bring your mind to a single point, and then who you are is already there, will just start coming to the surface. There's nothing you need to do, just get out of the way. And that was very powerful for me because a lot of what I was doing was striving. I was that traditional seeker, but I was striving really hard. I was putting a lot of effort, and I was doing the practices. I'll meditate for 6 hours, that sort of thing. And another teacher came along and says, "Stop trying so hard. Like, that's your problem. I can't see the joy to you. I can't stabilize it." And it says, "Oh, stop trying so hard. I want you to do less, and then I want you to do less." I'm like, "What do you mean less?" Yes, just do less and surrender to life and just remove what's in the way. And was revolutionary for me, and it has been for people when I'm coaching or teaching them. Just get out of the way. Let's start removing. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken. And I think that's important for people to understand. There's nothing broken. Right? There's just stuff in the way. Let's clear it. Let's bit by bit get it out of the way while being kind to ourselves. Get the stuff that's failing, your joy, your passions, your love, your purpose in life. Let's get it out of the way so it can come to the surface. And when it comes to the surface, let's start then putting some fire behind it.
Beautiful. Mark, there's a lot of people in the world right now who are fighting for something that they believe in, for something they feel is beautiful. There seems to be a lot of things to stand up against, um, but sometimes it feels like they're not making a difference. You show up and you try to be your best self, but you're not seeing what feels like these global scale forces. How does a single person exist in that world and still keep their determination as a spiritual warrior? What advice would you give them?
It's a difficult conversation, Bob, because this practice of like raising the frequency and raising the frequency, once you raise that frequency, like all of the war stuff, and the horrible stuff that happens on the planet, it's happening at a lower frequency, right? That's just straightforward. And so when that's happening, then it's not resonant with, where you are. We have compassion for that. We have love with that. We support people as best we can. But if we let it be disturbed by it, if we let it get affected by it, we're pulled down into that. If we get angry about it and we're pulled into it. You'll notice that a lot of the large, the big gurujis and stuff like that, they don't engage in those, subjects and things like that. And the reason being is that we're in this world of duality and karma and stuff like that. And so there's stuff happening. It's still happening for people because they've got a journey to go through, and it's a very difficult conversation with lots of potholes and lots of arguments and things like that. But for me, I don't put attention on those things. I continue to be, in your terms, continue my spiritual warrior, and then from that frequency help keep people raising above that and their vibration above that, and serve at that level, and be loving and walk the talk and try to influence like that as a ripple effect. I see you're doing the meditation for Gaza for how many days, and I think all of those things are wonderful to support a process and an understanding. And we don't want to see anything where people are suffering. Where when you come to the end point of the yoga conversation, it's unity. That's what yoga means, to yoke, right? To union, and then come back from duality and recognize this singularity, whatever you want to call singularity, God, Brahman, the quantum field, divine spirit, whatever you want to call it. But even science would say there is a unifying field. And when you come back to that, you recognize that it's all one. We're just different expressions of the one. And so we're all playing out our different roles. And so some people have to play out this role where they're in war and stuff like that, and other people are doing other stuff. But in the end, if it's just love that you're giving out, right, then that's impacting the whole field. And if you're caught up in the drama, even with best intentions, that's still impacting the whole field in that way. So I think maybe in a lot of ways, how you're doing it, meditation for Gaza, and then do that and make a difference in a certain way and bring awareness in a certain way, and but do it with an open heart. I think that's the way to do it, because it's flip side of the coin, right? If you're coming from the Israel side, they're seeing another conversation. If you're doing, Russia, and you're doing Ukraine, depends on which side of the fence that you're sitting on, which is truth. If you do the Arab world to the Western world, it depends on what side of the fence and the experiences that you've grown up, which is what your truth is. But you call it your truth, my truth, right? But it's just a narrowed down truth from your experiences. But when we open it up, it's all one. So how do you navigate a very challenging circumstances, difficult life? How do you do that, but still stay open to life and stay with an open heart? not so easy. It's the road less traveled, but that's what the yogis would say, and I kind of trust and follow those people.
You know what's really interesting about what you said? You're saying, just don't put your attention on that. And I think that someone might respond, well, if you're in the midst of that, how can you not put your attention on it? But I think that there's a really significant nuance in what you shared, and I want to hone in on that because I think it's absolutely exquisite, which is it's not that you're not paying attention to what's happening. What you're paying attention to is whether the energy that you're existing at, whether you're in the conflict or out of the conflict, it's whether you're putting the attention on the energy that yokes us, that brings us together, or you're putting your attention on the energy that divides us. And so I think that that's a really beautiful idea of, regardless of your situation, not putting your attention on it doesn't mean ignoring what's happening, but in fact, it's amplifying what's beautiful regardless of the conditions that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, we want all beings to be free of suffering, right? That's the teaching. So in our circumstance, what can we do to ease suffering? And being angry and agitated and pissed off and vengeful, it doesn't help. I get it. I get people's journeys if they're in the middle of that and they're being bombed and they've got no food and those sorts of things. And that's the journey of those people, that they're going through that. I can't change that directly. Yeah. All they can do is bring awareness of higher understanding, and share an open heart and try to walk those paths and create a ripple effect to other people that creates a ripple effect to other people and creates a ripple effect. I think there's a big awakening like that on the planet at the moment, because we see a lot of these wars are just manipulation and control. And there's agendas behind them that have nothing to do with the people. They're the people that are just suffering because of that. And I think because of this, people are waking up. They're like, hang on a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? And so we're starting to see the puppet masters and the underlying play of that lower vibrational stuff that tries to keep people in low density through fear and control. But if you go into that fear and control, you're joining it. So when you stay above it, you can start to see it for what it is, and then you can offer the opposite. You can hold the light, right, and then keep holding the light and ripple the light out, because the light's going to win in the end. It always does. And so people are waking up and they're moving towards the light. And as more and more people wake up to it, that shadow stuff gets exposed. People more wake up, it gets exposed, they wake up, and then there's a transitioning, but we're going through a pretty bumpy period at the moment. But anything where you get caught up in arguments, just duality, and it's not going to really serve anything from my perspective. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for the conversation today. I learned a lot. I'm inspired. I'm definitely going to take away lots from this conversation. Is there anything, while you have the audience's attention, is there anything that you'd like to say that you don't feel like you've said already?
Well, I think the warrior energy is important, but we don't have to look at it from that traditional, woo charge. It's taking that one step, taking that one step and putting one foot in front of the other. And we all know inside our heart and soul the things that don't serve us. And the warrior energy is to take the steps to set aside those things, whether it be people or friends or attitudes or emotions. Start setting those things aside and moving towards that higher possibility. That's the warrior path. But it doesn't have to be charged, but one step in front of the other. And when we all do that, we all move towards that kind of more awakened place that impacts all of us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience and inspiration with us. Um, If people feel connected to you and want to learn more and stay connected, how can they do that, Mark?
Most of my work is around with yoga teachers, and so my site is called yogacoach.com. We have two offerings. We do a mentorship program for yoga teachers, and then we do a mastery training, which is sort of the advanced yoga training. And we have a retreat in Bali in September, just down 50 meters from where I live. Beautiful place on the river, on the beach, and that's called High on Life, and it's creating this high vibrational life that we've been talking about.
Amazing. Oh, and I love your take on tapas. That creating an energy system in your body that can handle that higher vibration. That's beautiful. And then doing that incrementally so that it's healthy and sustainable. I love that, Mark. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Follow me
you.
on Instagram, bob.cirino, and you can join the Spiritual Warrior online community if you love conversations like this, you like topics like this, and you want to be in community with people who are committed to living fearlessly on purpose. Go to spiritualwarrior.life/home, and I hope to see you there. Thank you so much, Mark. Until next time.
You.